Hall, hosted by your 34th District legislators, Senator Emily Alvarado and Representative Brianna Thomas. Representative Joe Fitzgibbon is unable to join us tonight, but if you have questions specifically for him during the event, please submit those and we will make sure to get them to his office. Some of you have submitted questions in advance, and we will relay those questions to the legislators. You may also submit questions live in the comments section of the platform you are currently watching on. Submit your questions now, and we'll try to answer as many as we can over the next hour. Before we get started with your questions, the legislators will give some brief opening remarks. I'm going to hand it over to you, Senator Alvarado, to get things started.
Well, thanks, Jen, and hi, Rep. Thomas.
Hey there.
Hi, everyone from the 34th. Great to be with you tonight. I'm your state senator, Emily Alvarado. It's a privilege to represent the district. These are also tough times, and we're fighting hard for you here in Olympia. A couple things top of mind for me. One is we're doing everything we can to protect our state and our communities against federal overreach. Happy to talk more about that later. Two, we want to fight to build a budget that reflects our values. And part of doing that is making sure that we have the revenue needed to invest in key things in our community: K-12 education, healthcare, childcare, and more. And so we need to get progressive revenue. I'm sure you'll hear us talk more about the millionaire's tax and other revenue options. And then, as always, I am fighting hard on affordability. And for me, that means making housing more affordable, making healthcare more accessible and affordable, making it easier for all of us to have childcare so we can go to work and our kids have safe places to be. And so even as we're playing defense here in Olympia and trying to balance budget, we're fighting to be more proactive on affordability issues as well. Jen mentioned some of the ways that you can be in touch in this town hall, but you should always know that for both of us, our door is always open, and we are citizen legislators. We take it seriously, having an open door for you all. So if you don't get your question answered tonight, pick up a call, pick up a phone, write an email, stop by. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'd second everything that the good senator said, and I know that the good folks at Vashon and White Center have no problem finding either one of us. We've seen more of you this session than I think I do when I'm at home, and it's always warmly welcomed. This session for me, it being my second session, really is about making sure I understand the fundamentals of governance. So I've been putting quite a bit of energy into intentional bipartisanship while working my bills, taking amendments from the other side of the aisle where we can, and being the first one to reach out. We've seen what brinksmanship looks like at the federal level, and we don't need that infecting the way we do business here in Washington. I'm really proud to say that most of my bills are still alive by some sort of miracle, and I'm sure we'll get into the details of what those all include. But I think, we're here, we're happy to hear from you. We'd love to get your questions, and hopefully we can have an actual conversation so that you want to stay tuned in. And with that, let's get us rolling.
All right, let's take the first question. This question it was submitted ahead of time by a constituent. And the question is, what is being done at the state level to protect Washingtonians from ICE overreach?
Well, I think we should just acknowledge that what's happening with ICE in our country is disgusting. And people should be safe in our communities, and the kind of terror and intentional terror that's being inflicted on people, regardless of immigration status, but in particular on immigrants in our communities, is absolutely unacceptable. There are a lot of things we can't do when it comes to immigration enforcement. That's why we need change at the federal level. But what we can do is make sure that we're using our resources right, we're protecting our property, we're protecting our data, and that we are following Keep Washington Working in this state. So a few things that are happening, and I'll turn it over for you for some House bills as well. But as you probably know, we passed legislation to make sure that ICE officers can't be masked we'll see what happens with that legislation moving forward. But, having masked people running down our streets is terrifying, and it's not okay. We passed that bill off the Senate floor and sent it over to the House. We also passed legislation in the Senate that'll go over to the House that stops ICE from entering into schools or hospitals or childcare centers unless they have an appropriate warrant. This is protective legislation. It gives policies to schools and hospitals and childcare providers so that they know how to follow the law and they can be a protective barrier there. We also have legislation that protects immigrant workers so that if federal enforcement is requesting information about employers' immigration status, then they can be notified of that. That is AG request legislation that we're working on to get that through the legislature. What else?
We are also, excuse me, Representative Mary Fossey from Everett introduced some policy that would create a register of any private property that is looking to be leased for the purposes of detention. One of the biggest issues we've got in front of us right now is ICE is swooping people up, our neighbors off the street. We don't know where they're going. So this register would require that if you as a private landowner wanted to participate in ICE detention, you'd have to let the fine state of Washington know. So at the very least, we know where they're taking our friends and our loved ones as they round them up and violate their due process rights. It's a small step in the right direction. We're also working on overreach when it comes to data protection. Yeah. Senate Bill 6002 brought forward by Senator Trudeau will help us restrict what ALPR or automatic license plate readers are used protecting people in sensitive locations. We know that Washington is a sanctuary state, not only for our undocumented friends and neighbors, but also people who are coming here to access healthcare, gender-affirming care, and safe legal medical abortion. What we don't want is to dissuade those folks from getting the services that they need that is currently still their right here in Washington state to feel like they're being spied on in a moment where we know they're already vulnerable. So that bill is cruising along. That's also been sent over to the House from the Senate. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you.
Also speaking about sensitive data information, we know that folks in the trans community are feeling really vulnerable right now with what's happening at the federal level. A bill by Senator Peterson that we passed off the Senate floor would make sure that if you go to change your sex identification on your driver's license, then making that change is not something that can be publicly disclosed to someone who wants to use that for nefarious purposes. So we're trying to protect data. We're trying to keep people safe, even under the terrible situation we have with this federal administration.
And I can't emphasize enough, there's what we can do here in Olympia, but I cannot overstate the value of community.
Yeah.
When I ran for this position is because the 34th is indeed the fighting 34th. And what we're fighting for is each other.
Yeah.
So if you know someone that is concerned about their safety during this challenging time, about taking their kids to school, getting them to doctor's appointments, going to their houses of worship, ask them if they need a ride. Be that bridge between their fear and the safety and sanctity of living their everyday lives. There's only so much the government can ever do, and we have to be willing to rely on each other and stand up for each other. So if you've got a neighbor you know is feeling nervous and needs groceries, maybe do the run for them. There's a million little ways that we can fill in the gaps and not give in to fear right now.
All right, we are going to take the next question. This one was also submitted ahead of time from a constituent. It says, I'm concerned about the proposed millionaires tax. Won't this open the door to an income tax on everyone?
I don't think that's our intention. I can say that right here and right now. I think the intention of the millionaires tax is to get us from being at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to regressivity. Listen, this is the 34th district. You all know everything about a tax code. And I know that you know everything about a tax code because you tell me when you come down to visit. So we don't need the 101 on how upside down we are and how we're behind Mississippi. We know that we have a thriving economy, and we know that the structures that we're working in right now are from an agrarian economy. We are now in a technological economy. Simply put, the way we make money in the state and capture the benefit for the state for being a conducive environment isn't working anymore. Now, do we need to be able to demonstrate to you that we're also trying to balance that with affordability mechanisms that everyday Washingtonians can feel? Sure. Are there arguments that it may be a slippery slope? I get that. But I think that part of what we have to do collectively and as a legislature is to earn your trust one step at a time as we build this policy to show that we are on the right track for small businesses, for everyday working folks, and for continued innovation that makes our economy strong.
I just want to say, I want to acknowledge your fears, but I want to start with what the millionaire's tax is. The millionaire's tax is a 9.9% tax on income above $1 million. Right now in Washington, we can tax income below $1 million. So talk about slippery slope. We can already impose an income tax. The reason why we haven't is because it's not fair for lower income people to pay the same thing as millionaires. So in this bill, we're really pushing on that concept and saying for those above $1 million, we're going to impose a tax and we're going to use that revenue to do two things. One, to invest in building a thriving middle class. I mean, that's how I see it. We need a strong middle class. The way you do that is by investing in schools, great K-12 schools, which takes up the majority of our budget, by the way. Around 50% of our budget is K-12 schools. We're going to invest in higher ed. We're going to invest in healthcare. Those are the things that strengthen the middle class. And you look at other states, 41 states have an income tax. The vast majority of those states tax you on income starting at your first dollar. This is progressive, saying for those people who make more than $1 million a year and that income gets taxed, this is 1% of people in Washington. And, I will say that in our district, I hear overwhelming support for the millionaire's tax. I think across the state you do. Mm-hmm. And I do support it because one, it brings in about $3 billion a year.
Little over three.
Little over three.
Mm-hmm. We're still negotiating.
We're fact checking here. A little over $3 billion a year. That's a lot of money that we can invest in our communities. And it gives us the platform to recalibrate our other taxes as well so that we make it more fair and we address the challenges with having a regressive tax code. So one, I strongly support the millionaire's tax. I think it's about time. We need to do it to invest in our community. And I'm not worried about the slippery slope argument because right now our tax code's about as upside down as it could get. And that's the thing we got to change.
Also, I think I just want to acknowledge the reticence. I mean, we're in the middle of a 93-year argument. That's both of our lifetime and our service stacked on top of each other with a little extra to go. So it's not surprising that folks are feeling a reticence, but it is also a 93-year-old argument, and that's not getting to the bottom of it sooner is part of why we're here now. Next question.
All right. Moving on to the next question, which ties in, I think, with the one you just answered, certainly related. What are you going to do to make this state more affordable to live in?
All right. Well, I think as we said before, one of the key things that we can do to make the state more affordable is by investing in key critical services that people rely on. Healthcare, housing, transportation, public education, higher education. Those are big cost drivers in people's lives. And when we can invest in leveling the playing field and delivering great services, that's important. But the way to achieve affordability isn't only through our investments. A couple of things that we're working on. One, we know that healthcare costs continue to rise and be really unsustainable for people. We know that folks are getting kicked off the healthcare because of federal changes, and that costs just keep going up. I have legislation, I hope to get it across the finish line, that would cap the interest on medical debt. Mm-hmm. Right now, you can be charged 9% interest on medical debt. That's just insult to injury, and it makes it harder and harder for people to pay their bills, and they drive into deeper cycles of debt. Medical debt right now, greatest cause of bankruptcy in Washington state, actually in the country. So this bill would cap interest on medical debt at 1%, helping to make healthcare more affordable and to make it easier on people's budgets. We have some housing legislation. Rep. Thomas and I are working together on legislation that would stop institutional investors from buying up single family homes. hopefully making it a little bit easier for those of us who can afford to buy a home to not be competing against all cash offers out in the community.
Driven by AI bots
Yeah.
making offers.
Yeah.
Well, people are actually actively at work.
You know, one of the affordability bills that I love is Senator Krishna Dasan has a bill to help reduce impacts of property taxes for seniors, older adults, making sure that more people can benefit from property tax exemptions. That's a big deal in a county like King County. It would mean that people, instead of at the 65% median income level, up to 80% median income would be able to qualify for the exemption. That's really important. We know there are a lot of older adults who bought their homes a long time ago when it was easier to afford to live in our area. This will help make living a little bit more affordable. You have some great bills for workers too.
Oh my gosh, I love workers. And my last thing on that, you know that based on our upside down tax system, we are incredibly reliant on levies. Levies hit your property taxes. You know, I can hear Vashon right now. I can hear you telling me that the wealth disparity on that island is growing, and Vashonites who have been there for 20, 30, 40 years want to stay in their homes. So if you've been there that long, then Krishna Dasan 6162 is something you might want to look at. And I think it builds on top of some of the good tax relief work we've already done at King County. Another big theme for me this year is intergovernmental cooperation. It turns out the government works best when it works together. And so I know that I've been taking very seriously trying to understand what's going on in our cities and our unincorporated areas and our county level of government as we prepare to try to shoulder the impact of federal failure. But yes, thank you so much for bringing up the workers. I love workers, as you all know. My bill 2355, giving domestic workers basic worker protections, is, knock on wood, cruising right through the House with, you guessed it, bipartisan support. We got 2 people to cross the aisle and say that the folks who come into our homes to care for our homes deserve to be brought into modernity. This may be hard to believe, but your nannies, your gardeners, your housekeepers, your maids are not guaranteed the same minimum wage that the rest of us are. This is absolutely directly connected to the history of slavery and indentured servitude, which impacts Black and brown people and immigrants disproportionately. So we're going to take that entire class of workers and bring it up to the same status quo and boundaries that everyone else has been enjoying so far.
You know, a few things I'm thinking about on affordability too. You know, utility costs keep rising. Few things we're doing to address that here. I know Rep. Mena has a bill to establish a new statewide utility discount program, helping to address the impacts of rising utility costs on families across the state.
That's 1903 for those following along by the 4-digit code.
That's good to know the numbers. Also, the impacts of data centers keep rising the costs of utilities across the state. And I do know Rep. Dolio had the bill,
which the 4-digit code escapes me, but yes, we did actually send that one over to the Senate as well. There's some great protections in that bill. Most importantly, prioritization of grid use. And so if we're in an emergency situation, a data center answering all those very important, but not necessarily tiny ChatGPT questions are going to be deprioritized in order to make sure that homes and farms are taken care of first in emergency situations. Also, we know what resource depletion these AI centers bring in under the guise of employment. Well, the employment is very important because we know our building trade and construction trade brothers and sisters are not seeing the projects that they need right now. Those are temporary, short-term jobs. Those are not ongoing jobs. So when we're evaluating what resources we are investing in and sharing across the state of Washington, I don't want just jobs for the sake of jobs. I want good jobs and I want long-term jobs. And I don't want anyone getting a tax credit that can't give me both.
All right. The next question that we've got is, I'm frustrated about the new 3% fee on credit and debit card transactions used to buy ferry fares. What is the reason for this?
The cost of doing business in capitalism. So if you're a small business owner and you're listening to me, you already know about these merchant fees. Not only, and a lot of them are being passed on to consumers at your point of sale in your corner store, or they're being wrapped into dynamic pricing in the grocery stores and you just don't see it. With the 3% surcharge, we're being upfront and letting you know what the cost of doing business is for that agency. So while it is unseemly, it is also timely because we are in this budget crunch. Now, with that said, we do have a couple of ways around it. Good old-fashioned cash still works. So feel free to get the folding money out when you're going through the line. And for those of you transit users like myself, you've got your Orca card. You can prepay your Orca card and charge it up before you go to get onto the ferry. And you can use that to avoid the $3% transaction fee as well.
I do want to acknowledge, though, like there is a feeling of a layering effect, especially for folks on Vashon and
Limited incomes.
and people with limited incomes. It feels like you're paying more and getting less. And I just want to acknowledge that that's hard, and those are kind of the times we're in. When it comes to trying to get more for ferry service, want to talk a little bit about what we are trying to do to fight for better, more reliable service.
Go off, Queen.
It's hard. As you all know, we need more boats. It's going to take a long time to build those boats, but we are pushing for continued delivery of new vessels. We also know that a lot of folks on Vashon are really concerned about the service contingency plans and the impacts of that on reliability, because under the service contingency plan now, the only relief vessel would be the boat from Southworth, Fauntleroy area. We have been advocating, so you all know, our 34th delegation did write a letter.
Tersely worded letter.
Tersely worded letter to Washington State Ferries saying that we really believe we should have some more equity and of impact across the system, so that our boat is not the only one that's used as the relief vessel. We haven't gotten great answers as of this point, but we're going to keep advocating on that point. I know that it's really important to Vashon that we don't go backwards in losing service. So just know you can count on us. And if you have good ideas for instead what we should be doing as part of that service contingency plan, please feel free to let us know, and we'll continue advocating with Washington State Ferries on that issue.
And on the other side of the coin, when we're talking just passenger only, I've had the benefit of partnering with Representative Nance from the 26th. Our district touches 8 other districts. Sometimes I don't always get them right, but this one I believe is the 26th, for the Mosquito Fleet local partner passenger ferry options. Those would be vessels designed and made in Washington and maintained in Washington. So again, going back to jobs, that's jobs for construction and jobs for maintenance. Those are good, livable family wage jobs. And I believe that bill is being heard in transportation just right now.
I think it is.
Next question.
All right. Our next question is regarding higher ed. The question is, what is being done to protect funding for higher education?
That's a doozy. I'll be really honest with you on that one. Every dollar that isn't going that's on the chopping block is coming from childcare or higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the buckets that we have. I am very fortunate to serve on committee with Representative Dave Paul from the 10th, and this dude has been a fiscal hawk this season. I have not been in a single meeting with him where he hasn't asked, how much does it cost? Where's the money coming from? So he has led a bipartisan, bicameral caucus of those of us who care about higher education to put forward our priorities. But we're not going to get everything we're asking for. We're just not in that position right now. But I can tell you that there's no less between the reps and the senators than 17, maybe 21 of us that are watching every higher ed dollar. You know, I was the beneficiary of any various and sundry grants, low interest loans, work study opportunities. As you've all heard me say, it took me 12 years and 6 colleges to get my 4-year degree, my poor suffering father. But I appreciate what this means in terms of opportunity because of how I got here now. It gave me the chance to step up and step out of the community and environment and economy that I was born into. So we are taking it very seriously and doing everything we can to protect that funding.
Yeah, a few reflections here. When Rep. Thomas said, childcare and higher ed keep getting cut because those are the buckets. The main piece to know is this is where we have discretionary spending at the state. It's not protected constitutionally like K-12 or other
Matched with federal
or
funding,
matched
so
with
we
federal
can't move
funding.
it.
It is more discretionary. And that's why the issue of protecting higher ed funding really comes back to, do we have enough revenue overall? That's why I support the millionaire's tax. It's not the only way we get there, but we have to get more revenue if we're going to expand investments in things like higher ed and childcare. That's for sure. The other thing we know is that the baseline budget on things like higher ed, there's more demand. So our existing spending on things like college grants, it costs $100 million extra just to pay for the existing maintenance budget. So again, hate to sound like a broken record here, but this is why we need more sustainable and hopefully more progressive revenue to cover the increasing needs that our communities have. Look, you should be able to get a higher education if you want one. I sometimes I wake up, I'm like, where are we? 2026 America, where we're still arguing over these things. But in our state, we need more resources if we're going to be able to make these continued investments. Then there's the path where, well, we could raise revenue that's earmarked for higher ed. And I know that Rep. Reed, for example, had legislation which would have increased advanced computing surcharge and would have generated a lot of dedicated revenue specifically for higher ed. That bill died. And we could even talk more about some of the great revenue bills that I supported, you probably supported,
for sure,
that have died along the way. It's hard to get revenue passed here in Olympia. And even when it's for great things like we care about, like higher ed. So those are my reflections. We need more revenue, certainly support more higher ed investments, but we got to get the revenue to get there. And we haven't had great luck with direct direct revenue that's focused on that area. So we got to go overall bigger to increasing the pie.
And we'll circle back to dead bills in a minute because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. But I do think that the two of us sitting here in front of you, just a reminder, while we are fighting here in Olympia, I promise you, we are the fighting 34th. No one takes either one of us terribly lightly in a serious conversation about whether or not grad students should have to choose between childcare, housing, and food. Nobody has any doubt where the both of us stand on that, but governing remains a team sport. And I still have to get enough votes to actually get something out of committee or get it off the floor or get it over to you and then concur. So that's been a challenge that we've seen quite a bit of this year as well. And again, we'll circle back to our favorite dead bills in a little bit.
I'll also say, what comes up for me is that part of the debate that you're going to hear about in the public over the millionaire's tax is how much of that revenue generated from the millionaire's tax should go to offsetting existing taxes and how much should go to investing in the critical services that our communities rely on. And when I think about things like higher ed or childcare, I tend to lean more invest than maybe other colleagues here. You certainly hear the debate back at home. And I think those of us who want to make these generational investments on expanding higher ed, expanding healthcare access, and expanding childcare access need to be fighting to say, let's make those investments. And yes, we need to fix our tax code. And yes, we should undo some of the most regressive taxes we have right now, but we should also invest in our future.
Next question.
All right. And just a reminder to folks, if you have a question for the legislators, please submit that in the chat of the platform that you are on. Here is a question from one of the chats. It says, Rep. Thomas, would you please work with your colleagues to amend SB 5346 to move more quickly on removing phones from schools? The deadline for OSPI to deliver its report can be moved to 12/2026.
Mhm.
I mean, I love that. You've all heard me say, I want to turn the internet off entirely, but until I'm actually able to achieve that lofty, august, and I think righteous goal, the least we can do is give our kids a fighting chance to focus while we have them in schools. We need to give our teachers the room to be able to actually teach. We know we're asking a lot of them in the classroom already, and battling with an addictive pocket computer should be the least of their concerns. So I'm happy to work with my colleagues to make sure that that bill is getting the attention and time that it needs. We are still going through the committee process right now, and I don't sit on education, but I don't sit too far from Representative Santos in my office or on the floor. So I'm happy to walk over there and put a little bug in her ear.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge some of I've talked to incredible parents and advocates in the 34th who I know wanted to see a much stronger bill than the vehicle that was moving out of the Senate. I supported a stronger bill as well. Sometimes you get what you're dealt with in order to move quickly in a short session, and that's just where we're at. But I do think it could be stronger. Look, I heard really compelling stories from folks in the district where on Vashon, you can put your phone away, but in other parts of the district, you're not. And we want that equity across the district and across the state. I would have supported a stronger bill had it come. This is the one we've got. Hopefully we'll be able to, at a minimum, get it across the finish line and see if we can improve it. And I thank all the parent advocates who have met with me and shared the importance of this legislation and where you'd like to see it go.
And another thing I'll mention in a short session, many of our colleagues did not give the session the courtesy of submitting less than normal amounts of bills. I didn't submit very many bills this year because I knew we didn't have a lot of time to really develop policy in that deep, meaningful way. And some of our colleagues still dropped a whole bunch of bills. So we're doing a lot of sifting through. I think this year in the House alone, it was an additional 700 bills for a 60-day session. That is a Herculean amount of work and consideration, both on the part of the members, but more importantly on the part of the staff and all of you advocates that are trying to get our attention in a big year when we're having this conversation about the millionaire's tax. It takes up a little more room than some of the policy ideas that are still very important to us. And don't worry, if we don't get it quite right this year, we'll take another stab at it.
All right. Another question that came through one of the chats. It says, will you support SB 5862 that provides a COLA for the state's oldest school employees? Please do and put it in the final budget.
Yeah, absolutely support that. Sorry that the oldest public servants
that are women
state have to come back and do this legislatively. It is certainly a broken system that each year we're talking to you about a COLA. Should be given, should be part of the baseline, but absolutely you've got our support and continue to fight for it and get it in the budget.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and speak to the fact that we've got a gender equity issue here.
Right.
Like these are the women who helped educate all of us to get to this point, having to come back year after year after year
it's not okay.
is not okay. I am always happy to meet with them, but I'd be even more happy to not need to. So yes, very supportive.
All right. Next question. It says, can our reps speak to the Washington tax bill? Quick progressive revenue would be great to address budget cuts to education.
I believe that's Rep. Scott's bill, if I'm understanding correctly. So, maybe you've heard of a little tax that the city of Seattle referred to as Jumpstart or the head tax or even less kind things initially, but we know that we have got high earners in our community, and we know that they work for companies that are earning astronomical profits because they are in such a conducive business environment. We saw, despite some of the concerns and hesitation on behalf of the business community, that when the city of Seattle found herself in a meaningful deficit two biennium ago, that Jumpstart revenue is what closed the gap and helped us contain and maintain the social safety net. So it is tried, it is tested already here in Washington State, and we know that it works. And for me, not only is it the safety net and Washington that we're investing in, but it's economic viability and a balancing of the field between cities. Right now, cities outside of our district are not having to pay their fair share when it comes to what the state has got to provide because they don't have the same incentive. They get to make more money and pay less taxes than what we're used to contributing in Seattle. And so I think, Seattle being one of the economic engines of our fine state, we don't mind paying our share if it means everyone does better. We just think everyone should pay their fair share so everyone does better.
Yeah, I'll say I support the statewide payroll tax and the Washington proposal. There was a Senate companion by Senator Saldana, which I signed on to. I would have voted for. And I agree with whoever posted the comment that part of the benefit of that proposal is that revenue comes in immediately.
Yeah.
And we do know that the harshest time in our budget outlook right now is going to be next year. So if we cobble things together this year, next year is going to be really tough. Even looking at the millionaire's tax, we're not going to be collecting revenue for a few years. So we're continuing to look at this cut cycle until we get to that future. I much rather would have passed Washington and made immediate investments in our community. I'm going to be blunt. There was not the support. I'm not hearing the support to move that forward. I think especially as the millionaire's tax came into play and there is support in both chambers and by the governor, because remember that it needs to pass the governor as well.
You've heard of him.
That proposal doesn't really seem to have legs right now, but I think the point is well taken that it is fast and it invests in exactly the things that I'd love to see invested in, like housing and schools and our community. So I think we should continue to, Olympia is a tricky place where people don't like to take a lot of tax votes. That's really what it comes down to. So now that we have momentum around the millionaire's tax, it seems like other things are getting crowded out, which could have actually been complementary in creating a really balanced and thoughtful tax code that meets both immediate and long-term needs. But so for right now, it seems off the table. I would have supported it for sure, especially because we see in Seattle what an impact it leaves.
We have a question that came in through Facebook. The question was, what committees are you part of?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. So I am on the Housing Committee. I took this fine lady's seat when I got appointed. I am also on the Post-Secondary Education and Workforce Development, or PEW Committee. That's your higher ed committee. And then the one that don't tell Cindy Ryu I call it this, but I call it the junk drawer. The Technology, Economic Development, and Veterans Committee, or other duties as assigned.
I serve as vice chair on the Housing Committee and vice chair on Labor and Commerce. So seeing a lot of the issues related to our workforce, related to unemployment, paid family medical leave, workers' compensation programs. And then I serve on transportation, where I get to represent a lot of our district's interests in transportation, funding, and policy.
All right. We have a question that came in also through Facebook. It says, thank you, Representative Thomas, for helping 1128 Workforce Standards Board for Childcare through the House. Senator Alvarado, do you foresee any obstacles between this bill and passing? If so, who do I need to annoy to get it through?
Thanks, Jordan.
Great question, Jordan. So a few things. We just voted this out of Labor and Commerce this morning. So that means, and I think it went straight to the Rules Committee. So that means that it's eligible for a vote for the entire Senate. Just to back up, for those of you who don't know about this, childcare workers are underpaid in our state and they provide critical services. They care for our kids and they deserve better wages and better working conditions. We also know that our childcare system in general is pretty broken. And we're going to fix it by getting more subsidy and by lowering costs for families that don't have subsidy through increased investments. And to me, paying workers better helps make the whole system better. So setting up a standards board where there's more meaningful voice by workers and union voices so that we can make recommendations, have proposals about how to reestablish wages and working conditions and standards is common sense, because I think that helps make the system better for all of our kids. There's been a lot of opposition to this legislation, though. And I think part of the opposition, I'll just say, is that people see our broken system and they want quick fixes to our broken system. And I think right now we have people in our community who are like, wait a minute, you're proposing hundreds of millions of dollars cuts to Working Connections childcare, and then we're going to create this workforce standards board. And for me, I say we shouldn't do the cuts. We should have the board, and we should figure out how we continue to drive investments and best practices in our childcare system. I think keep advocating so that all senators hear that message. Hopefully we can get it across the finish line, Jordan.
And Jordan, to answer your question directly about who to annoy, the answer is the Senate. All of it. Everyone. Don't miss a single one. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about
I'm a yes.
Yeah, she's a yes. About the way, the nature of the moment that we're in, trying to collaboratively govern. You know, a lot of the things that folks are frustrated about not moving forward, again, it is not from a lack of either one of us hooting and hollering. We hoot, we holler, but we also don't always have the vote. So that frustration, I assure you, we share it as well. And we share it while standing on marble for 13 hours at a go. My knees are bad.
But I just want to say it again. I'm really disappointed with, I think that childcare has borne the brunt of cuts in our state over last year for sure. And it looks like, again, because it's part of the discretionary budget for the state. I mean, it's not part of the discretionary budget for a household. People can't work without childcare. We know we're losing out on billions of dollars of economic activity because we don't invest in childcare. So in addition to the Workforce Standards Board, I hope that as many folks out there who share my passion on this issue continue to advocate, because this is why we need revenue to invest in our kids.
Next question.
All right. What is a favorite bill that you've worked on this year?
Well, thanks so much. It's dead, but I loved it. So I've got a constitutional amendment because, you know, I've been here one whole session. I've got ideas about how we should do business better already that would allow the legislature to set its own schedule. Right now, we are constitutionally mandated to meet for 105 consecutive days in odd years and 60 consecutive days in even years. There are a lot of arguments about what the schedule should look like from some of my Republican colleagues being like, it should be even shorter. And I'm like, guys, I can't do this many bills in even less time. To some more progressive folks who think that we should have a full-time legislature, which comes with its own charms and challenges. But I think having a healthy and robust conversation about how we amend a system that hasn't been seriously taken a look at, talk about a workforce study that we need to do. How are we doing the business of Washington State to get the best results possible? And is it one other system than the one that we've got, which was last updated in the 1970s, I believe? We have the internet now, and maybe we need to have slightly different working conditions and use those tools to create better policy for Washington.
Well, my favorite bill that I worked on is also dead, which tells you a lot about Olympia. I sponsored legislation that called the Apple Health Employer Assessment that would have charged assessed a new fee on some of the largest employers in our state whose employees are on Medicaid, on state Apple Health program. And, you know, for me, I believe in this, and it would have raised over $800 million a year. And for me, I am passionate about this issue for a few reasons. One, because Walmart shouldn't get corporate welfare from our state when too many people are suffering. Two, because we're going to make really tough decisions right now about our healthcare budget in the state. Mm-hmm. We have more pressure because of federal law, because of HR 1. We're going to have to pay more and get less. We know that a lot of members in our community are going to lose healthcare because of HR 1, and the state's going to be in a position where we can either watch people suffer and lose insurance, or we can step up and try to pay more. And I think part of who should pay more is the major corporations like Walmart, who has their employees making low wages, working part-time, and on state healthcare benefits. So to me, it was an elegant solution that could have raised revenue for healthcare, kept people insured, and charge the largest corporations in our state, whose employees are the ones getting the health care, and that bill died. But we'll bring it back. I know I talked to a legislator from Colorado who was similarly introducing the same legislation, because across the country now, our state budgets are impacted by the terrible decisions at the federal levels. And those of us who want to fight to keep healthcare for people are going to have to get more and more creative on what our solutions are.
Single payer.
Well, that would be a great solution.
Who said that?
Healthcare for all.
Next question is, can you discuss support for the reporting requirement in the data center bill, HB 2515? Washington agencies and utilities need this information to responsibly plan for rapid data center growth.
Ooh, I'll take that as an important piece of feedback. I love whoever sent that in. I wouldn't have known about that specific reporting requirement, but please write us an email. Tell us more about why this information is necessary, and we'll make sure that it is in the bill. That went through the House. It's coming over to me. If you're worried that it's going to be cut out of the legislation, let me know. Happy to help keep an eye on it. Sometimes at this point of session, what I will say is we see some really important reporting requirements and others come out of legislation because it drives a fiscal note. And as we said, we have a budget challenge. But I also think good administration and good information is important. So happy to advocate for data and information that's necessary.
Ditto.
All right. This is not so much a question, more of a comment. It says, thank you, Representative Thomas, for sponsoring a proviso to return some funding to the state library. The state library offers great services, including the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library.
My sincere pleasure. The idea that, I respect the need to figure out a way to balance this budget, but I just didn't think it was on the backs of the blind. Just putting that all the way out there. And I am so fortunate to have great seatmates where we are very intentional and collaborative around the budget process and what we're asking for, to make sure that we're asking for things that are district specific and that are actually achievable, which then gives us room to also take a broader approach to what is good for all Washingtonians. It's the only library, the Books for the Blind, that we have here in Washington, and it being completely closed down means not only access to information, but also to community, to technology that folks can check out that allows them to live independently. So when we're looking at the core values of housing stability, quality of life, food access, those sorts of things, for me, this very much was a quality of life and equity issue. And I was just so pleased to be able to work with my teammates here that gave me the room to bring up this important issue. I know that it has been noted in both the House and Senate budgets. I'm going to go dig into that with Jordan, who you all get to engage with all the time. She says hi, to make sure we understand exactly what is in that budget and if there's any more fussing we need to do about it.
Yeah, I certainly support the investment. So glad that Rep. Thomas was the champion of that. And I just think it's worth reflecting on when people try to say that we have a spending problem, and yet we're proposing or trying to defend cuts against book service for people who are blind or older adults. That's not a spending problem. This is basic humanity. And I feel okay taxing millionaires in order to get the resources so that we're not making these kinds of decisions. And I'll continue to fight for those kinds of investments for our district.
Have you heard that she wants to tax the millionaires, guys? Has that come up at all this hour?
We need revenue.
So we've got a question. It says, are you aware that due to the new State Board of Community and Technical College allocation funding model, the Parent Education and Cooperative Preschool Program through South Seattle College is at risk of closure, along with 13 other similar programs across the state?
Yeah, I do want to thank the parent advocates who came and talked to me in Olympia and brought this to our attention. I know co-op preschools are super important. One of my kids went to co-op preschools. It's a fabulous model, and it's part of our continuum of childcare options and of child development options and of opportunities for parents. So I have talked to the president of Seattle colleges and have brought up the issue internally about how we make sure we try to preserve that funding. I think part of it will come to how community colleges stay whole, or what the approach to their cuts is, so that at least they have the flexibility to invest in the programs that they see as really important. But thanks for continuing to flag this issue. It would be absolutely devastating to lose 13 programs, including this program, place where we shouldn't go backwards. So we'll keep fighting to make sure that the community colleges and the co-op preschools have the resources they need. Again, it's a terrible year, and it really is these programs for our kids that keep getting hit.
All right. Next question. Some budgets were released today. What are your thoughts on current proposals?
Well, ours is 1,100 pages, so I have not finished reading all of it. But I do think, we are taking my poor Ellie is just freaking out. We are taking a do as little harm as possible approach. Our budget teams are wizards of another measure, and so they're doing a really good job of making sure we get briefed in full and understand all the ins and outs and the trade-offs that they've made. We did have a more optimistic than expected revenue projection right before this final set of numbers came out, and the investments are reflected of that opportunity for growth that we've got there, particularly saving higher ed cuts, particularly saving childcare implications. So I'm feeling more optimistic than I have in the 2 years that I've been here, guys, because we're just marginally less broke.
That was rosier than my picture, maybe. Look, the budget team does as well as they can with what we have. A few things I'll reflect on. One, we are going to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on HR 1 and other federal, the implications from the federal cuts. A lot of that is money that I would prefer not to be spending on implementing work requirements and other policies that means that people will lose care. So the idea that we're going to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on policies that I don't support is really grim. There's also some basic needs things that we will be paying for in our budget that is because of federal cuts. So given the loss of supports and services for immigrant communities, including folks who are lawfully present, we're going to be backfilling that with tens of millions of dollars. We're investing more in our Attorney General's office to help continue to sue the federal administration. We have some resources to help backfill in case the federal government cuts permanent supportive housing. None of those, we had over $10 million to help backfill some reproductive health care costs. So again, because of what the feds are doing, we're spending tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to deliver the same basic services or implementing policies we don't like. That makes me very frustrated, and that is part of the budget. Outside of that, I think budget writers are working hard to continue investments where we really strongly value it for developmental disability community and those investments, long-term care continued investments. And then we see maintenance level investments. It just costs more to do the cost of business. And that's always frustrating. I know our household budgets feel that, like we're paying more just to do the same thing. But seeing that in our state budget is really challenging too, because you want to do more with more, and we're not able to do that. Part of running government is also spending tens of millions of dollars on IT projects and on lawsuits, and that's part of the budget too. And my reflection again is, even to keep up with maintenance level budget, unless we have a different path for revenue, we're not going to continue to be able to do that. So those are some reflections. Personally, I've already mentioned continued cuts to Working Connections childcare really is frustrating to me, and I don't support those. And I think we need more resources to invest in our kids. So yes, the revenue forecast was better than expected, so we're not as much in the red, but I think this budget still tells a story that the federal government is causing ripple effects, really terrible harm to us. 2, to be sustainable on basic needs and basic services, we need revenue. And 3, that when the feds bail, we will try to step up and fight for our communities.
We're going to try to squeeze one more question in here. We got a question. What are your thoughts on SB 6148 to modify the maximum terms of Regional Transit Authority bond issues?
Oh, yeah, I did vote in support of that. I know there's controversy in the community. What I've understood from Sound Transit is that extending the term to 75 years will give some short-term flexibility so that they can do cash management and cost savings to help deliver light rail to West Seattle. And conversation will continue. I've talked to budget writers. I think there is agreement that this helps to move us forward in bringing light rail to West Seattle, and that's why I supported it.
I don't sit on the Transportation Committee in the House, so I haven't had to consider it yet, but thank you for bringing it to my attention.
So we want to say thank you to everyone who has taken the time tonight to participate in our virtual town hall. I'm going to turn it back over to the legislators to bring us home with closing remarks. This time, Representative Thomas, would you like to go first? And then we'll hear from Senator Alvarado. Thanks to everyone again for joining us.
Thank you so much. I will continue to tell each and every one of you that I meet with here on campus and in the interim and on the phone and in the grocery store that this is the hardest job I have ever had, no questions asked. It is also the most rewarding, even though I'm very, very tired and we're almost done. I get to work with some amazing people that really do have the best interest of Washingtonians at heart and do really take it seriously when I say the same thing for the 15th time, a slightly different tone until I get it through your head because it's important and my constituents want it. You know, I know that we're going through really challenging times and everyone keeps telling me that they're going to turn around and I believe them. And so I am being a little rosier and I am being a little more hopeful than what the paperwork decries of the situation we're actually in. But I just really believe in us. I believe in the teamwork that we bring to this work. I believe in each other. I believe how much the 34th cares about its community and about being good neighbors and those basic building blocks of society that I get to bring to the marble here with me. So thank you for your trust. Thank you for believing me and going with me when I have to tell you things that you don't really hear. I'm just always trying to be honest with you. And my question to all of you watching is, I got a record player, so please put in the chat what record you would like to see in the collection for the next time you come down to Olympia.
Well, thanks everyone for coming out. I can't even express how lucky I feel to represent the 34th. Honestly, being here and getting to stand up for justice and fairness and to push back against the terrible federal actions and to fight for revenue and to fight for fairness and to say, I'm doing this because my constituents asked me to, that's a privilege and an honor that I don't take lightly. So we're fighting for you here. We only know how to do that when you tell us what you need from us. So please continue to be in touch and send us your feedback. We'll be here fighting for a good budget, fighting for the revenue our communities deserve, fighting to protect our communities from the feds and our
environment. On behalf of Joe, who's not here, and the environment.
And just fighting to make life better for all of us. So thank you. Be in touch with us. Loved having this opportunity to talk with you all.
See you when we get back to the district.